In this video session or clip, we're going to look at the effect of a minimum wage on the number or the labor market of unskilled labourers, and we will look, make it more relevant to the South African situation, where recently there was the strike on the farm workers, minimum wages, etc., and what are the effects on the market for unskilled labour. So before we looked at it, we need to go back to price controls and price floors, because the minimum wage is an example of a price floor. So what is a price floor? It's a government mandated minimum price below which legal trades cannot be made. So if the government set that price, it's a minimum price, and if the price is set above the equilibrium price or the equilibrium wage of that market, the following two effects arises: surpluses and fewer exchanges. So for us, it's important, what is the effect of a minimum wage as an example of a price floor in the market for unskilled labor. So when we draw this diagram, and there's no slide on it, you've got the exhibit there in the textbook. We measure the wage rate on the vertical axis and the number of unskilled workers on the horizontal axis. And then we draw your demand curve. This is the demand for labor, and this is your supply of labor. Now, who demands labor? Is the firms, is the farm owners or the farmers, right? They will demand labor. Who supply labor is the workers. They've got the skills, they've got the qualifications. They will supply labor to the firms. So it works in the opposite direction of, for example, goods and services, where firms supply goods and services and consumers demand goods and services. Okay, so that is your demand curve for labor and your supply curve for labor. So we will look at the farm workers, the situation. Now, remember, if you can look at, in the news, the minimum wage was, before it was increased recently in March, it was 69 Rand. So we start off and we assume that the equilibrium wage is 69 Rand per hour. So that is the equilibrium wage. And at that equilibrium wage, we can say, for example, we just use a hypothetical figure, or we can use it in the textbook. They say N1, that is the number of laborers that has been or being employed at the equilibrium wage. So that is a number of workers who will be employed at the equilibrium wage. So that is N1, and that is your equilibrium point. So this is the starting point. Okay, so this is the equilibrium wage, 69 Rand, which we just use as an example, and N1 is the number of workers employed at this wage. Okay, now the workers are not happy with 69 Rand, and they go on strike. There's violence and all of this, and in the end, the government, through the Department of Labour, announced, or the Minister of Labour announced, that the minimum wage will increase to 105 Rand. Okay. So what is the effect of this minimum wage now, the new minimum wage, on the number of unskilled workers? So let's look at it. If there's an increase in the minimum wage, it will now be 105. So what is the effect of this minimum wage? So it's 105 now. So there's a higher, or there is now a minimum wage, or we can look at it from both sides. This was the former equilibrium wage or minimum wage, and this is the new minimum wage. So what is the effect on the number of unskilled workers on the market for unskilled labor in the farming sector? So when we look at 105, when we go with the broken line up till the demand curve, okay, then you come down up till the horizontal axis, and then you say N2. Now what is N2? N2 is the number of workers that will be employed at this new minimum wage. Okay, so there is now, what is happening with the number of workers that is being employed will be less, because when the situation was there, the equilibrium wage was 69 Rand, N1 was the number of laborers that was employed. Now when the minimum wage increased to 105, it decreases to N2. So there's less labor employed. If you look at the number of labor that will be supplied at this wage, it will be higher because more workers will be willing to work at the higher minimum wage. So if you look at where it intersects your supply curve, then you come down to your horizontal axis where the number of workers employed is being measured. Then you will see N3. What is N3? That is the number of workers that are willing to work at this higher wage, which is logical. If the wages are higher, more workers are willing to work. So this is the number of workers that are willing to work at this higher wage. This is the number of workers that will be employed by the farmers. It will be less, right, at the higher minimum wage, because farmers have to pay now higher wage. Legally, they are bound by law to pay this wage, right, and not lower than this wage. Okay. So, what is the effect of this higher or this minimum wage now, which is above the equilibrium wage, right? It means that on the market for this farm workers, what will be created? You will see there's now a surplus of farm workers or, unskilled workers. We can use figures here. Say, for example, when the equilibrium wage was 69 Rand, the previous minimum wage, we can say, just hypothetically, 2,000 workers was employed, just hypothetically. Okay, when the minimum wage was increased, farmers only employed 1,500 farm workers, which is less because it costs more now for farm workers to employ workers. But how many workers are willing to work at this higher wage? And you will see, say, for example, 2,500. So what is happening now? We've got the surplus in the labor market. At the moment, at a minimum wage of 105, what is the number of workers that are willing to work at that higher minimum wage? Is 2,500. How many workers are employed by farmers at this minimum wage? Is only 1,500. So what is happening now? There's a surplus of 1,000, which is created by who? By the government, which is imposing a minimum wage. So it creates a surplus, and this will lead to retrenchments. And the number of unskilled workers then will be retrenched, and the number of unskilled workers that will be unemployed will increase. So the effect of a minimum wage, and you can see it also there in your slide, the effect of a minimum wage is what? Is that there will be a surplus of workers, number one, and there will be a higher number of unemployed, unskilled labor. And this is exactly based on empirical evidence. Minimum wages have been, a couple of years ago, it was implemented in the hospitality industry, for domestic workers, for farm workers, and it has led, empirical evidence has shown, facts, statistics have shown that, people have lost their jobs. Farm workers specifically have lost their jobs. They have been retrenched because, the employers, because the cost of labor becomes now more. And then either employers will retrench workers or workers have to accept wage cuts. So this is the effect of a minimum wage on the market for unskilled labor, and we use the farm working, the saga and the strike and all of this as just to apply this minimum wage principle as a price floor. You remember, the minimum wage is an example of a price floor. And a price floor is only effective if the price floor, the minimum price or the minimum wage, is set above the equilibrium wage. And the first important effect of that is it causes a surplus of workers, and it means that some workers will lose their jobs. There will be higher unemployment. Okay, so that covers, minimum wages as an example of a price floor. And you must make sure that you are able to explain the effects of a minimum wage, and also to use a diagram to illustrate the impact of a minimum wage.